Hello everyone and welcome to Pro Design. In this video, I'll show you how to master interior lighting in V-Ray for SketchUp. You will learn how to illuminate your interior designs effectively to create visually stunning and realistic renders. Without further ado, let us jump right into it. The first thing is to ensure your model is ready for rendering. This includes applying materials that reflect real-world behavior under various lighting conditions. You also want to make sure that the scene composition is good enough. That is, the way you arrange your components. Is it realistic enough? Is it something reasonable? Is it something viewers can relate to? If it is, then you also want to make sure that you've set your camera views correctly. If you've done all this, then we are good to go to the next stage. The next thing to do is to add a V-Ray dome light into the scene. But before we do that, we want to make sure that our scene is well prepared for interactive rendering. To do that, come to V-Ray Asset Editor. Under Setting, come to Material Override. Once it is toggled on, select your preferred color, then close. Once that is done, make sure the quality of your render is turned to low plus or medium. In my own case, I would prefer medium. Then your render output, set it to 600. Make sure it is good enough for a smooth interactive rendering. The next thing you want to also do is to exclude your glass pane. Select your glass, come under binding. You will see the last option here can be overridden. By default, it's usually checked. Make sure it is unchecked so that your glass pane will permit light into the scene. Do that for all the window glass within your scene. After you've done this, we are then ready to go ahead to add our V-Ray dome light. Come to the V-Ray light. You will see the option called dome light. Click on that and place anywhere in the scene. In this case, I'm placing it right here. Once you've placed that, come to light. In the asset editor, you will see it has appeared here. Once it has appeared, then we want to leave it and try our interactive rendering. To start the interactive rendering, you can either start from here by clicking on this drop down and selecting the render with V-Ray interactive, or we come to the rendering option here and select the render interactive. Now this is what we have by default. You can see the room is a bit dark. The first thing you want to make sure you do is to come under the layers here and select exposure. In my own case, I've selected exposure before. So once you pick exposure, you'll see it appeared here. Make sure it is toggled on, and you see immediately your scene improves as you set your exposure. So this is highlight bond. So you make sure you set your exposure value to around 1.5. This is tentative, as this is not what would be in the final rendering, just to refine your scene and to see things clearly. Now we have this scene, which if we zoom into, we'll see it's still clearing up the noise, which is okay. Let's stop the interactive rendering. Now let's configure our V-Ray dome light. Under the light, come to V-Ray dome light. Then under the parameter settings, come to the color texture HDRI, and then you come to the material slot. Click on this. It will bring you to a place where you can select your HDRI. That is a file that you've downloaded. I usually get them from Polyhaven and noemotions.net. I will leave the link down for you in the video description. So I'll click on this file, then go to my HDRI files. So you can test whatever HDRI that you feel comfortable with or you feel you like. Let's just check the HDRI Sun A that I downloaded from noemotions.net. Once you click on that, you click on open, and it has loaded it into this. Now if we try to render this again, as you can see, it has previewed that. So this is what it is. Now if we try to start the interactive rendering again, you can see a lot has changed now from what we had before. It is darker because now we are using our HDRI lighting to simulate the light within the environment, and also our sunlight is on. But for now, let's just toggle the sunlight off, so we are left with just the HDRI dome light. To increase the brightness here, firstly let's tune up the intensity of the dome light here. Let's tune it to 50, and immediately we can see the changes in our scene. Now the scene becomes brighter. May want to even increase that the more. Let's stop the interactive rendering and increase this to 60. Let's try and check if it is okay. Now the HDRI is fair. The way the image is wrapped around the whole environment is spherical. So you can come here to the file itself, come to texture placement, and under the rotate horizontal, you can turn it around the image itself so that it has different light simulations for different degrees. So let's bring it down to minus 124.7. okay, so just fine tune until you have something you like. This is giving like a warm effect on the scene. You can see this already. Let's go forward a bit. No, this is darker. Let's even go to minus 320. This is a bit lighter, which is nice. Let's move even forward. There's more light within the scene. We can see this around here. Let's go a little backward. Okay, this is okay. I want the highlight to be on this wall here that my mouse is hovering about, which is okay. The next thing we want to do now that we have our HDRI setup or the dome light setup is to introduce our sunlight. That's the V-Ray sunlight. So let's stop the interactive rendering and then come under the sun here and make sure it is turned on. Once it is turned on, let's come to the sunlight itself, and we want to customize the orientation. Let's turn it on, and with this custom orientation we can change the sun height, the sun rotation. Let's check how our scene is lit up now. Let's check with the interactive render. Now this is what we have. You notice that I made sure that the brightest part of my HDRI is highlighting this wall here. It is because I am also planning to bring my sun rays to fall upon this wall. So you make sure you simulate your HDRI together with your sun if you want to use your sun within the scene. If you have an HDRI that has enough sun effect, you can use that, and you don't need to bother yourself with adding sun from V-Ray. This is kind of directing the viewer's sight to focus on this area here and not just anywhere. You know, that's what architectural photography can help to achieve. So let's move on. Let me stop the interactive rendering and reduce the intensity of the sun. This looks too bright. Let's change that to like 0.5. all right, and then the size multiplier by default you see that as 0. What it does is that controls how soft or hard or harsh the shadow edges are. Now as it sets to 0 now, Let me try and render the scene. You can see the shadow edges are sharp, which in reality it's not usually the case. The farther light is to an object, the softer the shadow edges become. So that's how it works. Now this I usually set to 10. The higher the value, the softer the edges. So now it is very soft now. Very cool. So now let's move to the next thing to do. The next thing we want to do is to integrate V-Ray light for task lighting and highlights within the scene. We'll add V-Ray light to specific areas like under the cabinet, under the island. As we go on, I'll teach you how to adjust the size, intensity and color to simulate different light settings. Let's go. The first thing you want to check is where you want to highlight within the scene. I would like to highlight under the cabinet here. I would like to highlight the island. I would like to place some spotlight and also dependent lights as well. I would like to add some spotlighting. So without further ado, let's just go into that. So the first of the V-Ray light that I want to add is the rectangle light. So once you come to the light, pick the rectangle light and come underneath here, drag across. Once you drag that, you can click either up or down as it is to set the direction. So now I clicked downwards and then the direction is facing downwards. Now this arrow here is facing downwards. So I usually move it 1 centimeter away from any surface to avoid collision with that surface. Now the next thing I want to do is to add another rectangle light here just across all this, then set the direction as well, move it about 1 millimeter. Nice. And once I've done that, I want to add a rectangle light here, but in this setting. All right, add, then select the direction, then bring it around here, just over here. Then you can scale that as well, just like you are scaling any other components. Now this won't be good because this is a rectangle light over a circular light, so we don't want to do that. Let's just come to the asset editor so that we want to set this not to rectangle but disk. So I want this to be disk light, and you can see that it has changed that to disk, but I want to scale this so that it matches the sphere here. Nice. So now that we have this, I want to make sure I move about 1 mm and transfer this as well as a copy to this other part as well. The same thing I want to do to this pendant lights. Just station this right below this. I want this to just be an accent, not necessarily be this light source. So what I would do is that I would make this unique. That is, I want to separate this from this other light component so that whenever I edit this, it won't affect the rest of the light. Now I will right click on this and make unique. Once I make unique, I want to set the size. All right, set the size and make sure you put it right just below the pendant light. So I want to copy this to the other lights as well. All right, good, and copy to this other part as well. Now that we have our rectangle lights and our disk light in the scene. The next thing we want to add is our IES light. The IES light use real-world data to replicate the light output patterns from physical light fixtures. So we have files that we impute to replicate physical light from the real light fixtures. So what we want to do is come to light, select IES light, and you browse for your IES files. I want to select the real IES. I'm using the Corona IES light. You can use any IES file that you want, and click on open. Then you can place. Once you've placed this, now it is gonna take the form of the IES file that you've selected. Now this is the shape of the IES light that I've selected. Let me just leave it as that and try to copy this. All right, let me copy the two together and just copy, all right, onto this as well. So once we have that, you just want this to be like an accent lighting, not too much. So let's reduce the value to 500. Now we want to move to the light colors and the setting. The first one, we want to set the light under the island. Come to the setting here under the light. Then you want to set the color. So we want it to be a warm light. I want to just go with 3500, around 3545. And once we've set that, that's okay. We are good to go with that. Let's just make sure that our directionality is also set to about 0.02. Directionality is how far we want light to travel from the main source. Higher this is, the farther you can see here it travels from the main source. We don't want it to leave the main, because once you make it travel too far, you just see there won't be connection again from the light and the source, which you don't want that to happen. So let's just leave it at 0.15. Then the other light like this, we also set the same thing, 3500 and 0.15 as the directionality. The disk light, we want that to be cool, not warm. Oh, that was a mistake. I set the directionality instead of the temperature. We want this to be about 9000. That's kind of cool, and this is nice. This is what we want. Then directionality, let's leave the directionality. We don't really want light to travel up to this extent, just leave that. And because this and this are one component, whatever changes I've made here has affected on this as well. So let's go to our spotlight, that's our IES, and change this as well to 3500. That's warm. Let's try and set the light for this. Let's change this to warm, 3545, and also the directionality maybe 0.04, and it's okay. This is okay. Later we'll set the intensity as we test our light during the interactive rendering. The next, after we've placed our V-Ray light in the scene, is the light modifiers. The light modifiers are not necessarily going to show within your scene. They are used by photographer to add light effects within the scene. Like if you are familiar with a photography studio, you know that most of the time, and it's important, they use light box, different light, target light, just to create the effect within the scene. So the exact thing is obtainable in architectural photography as well as architectural visualization, which is what sets you apart from just anyone rendering. You have the knowledge of photography as well. Let's try to see what we've done or what we've achieved in our interactive render. we can see how beautiful the scene is just with our light, and this is looking good for me. As I'm saying that, I think it's really looking nice. Let's just set the intensity of this to 20, this to 20 as well, or to 15, this to 20, then this to 200. All right, so let's see what we have now. This is good and this looks nice. Let's stop that and place our light modifier just behind the window here. We want to place our rectangle light. All right, let me rotate that 180 degrees and make sure I place it just behind, and I want to shift it backwards a bit. And because this is just a modifier light, we don't want it to show at all, so select it, come here, and we will just say light modifier. All right, and leave it as it is, and the directionality you can set it as 0.1. then come to options and make sure it is invisible, and also it doesn't affect reflection. That means it won't show in glass and all, and just it doesn't also affect shadow. Nice. And this is what we want to do. Now if we check the scene will be overexposed now because we have this. Let's try and check the scene. Now this is overexposed. Let's select that and bring this to 2. So this is just to give the scene an overall lighting so that light can travel to places where the natural lighting, that's the HDRI, and the other lights could not reach. You always want your scene to have enough light. Come to exposure now, and then the highlight bond, you want to turn that down a bit, also the exposure down a bit, which is looking good. Now let's go to the material override and toggle it off. Then for the first time we want to render our scene with materials. Let's try our interactive render. Beautiful. It looks really nice. It looks nice, but the scene is dark. Now we can increase our exposure. Also come to the post-production here, come to the layer, then come to filmic tone map. So this is what I have already set my filmic tone map. Just here, come here, set your shoulder strength to 0.299. No, it depends on the scene. All these things are what you have to test out, to give you what you want. Then the linear strength as well, this is what I have here. Then the most important part is the lookup table. So the lookup table as well, I usually get my files from Corona. If you have Corona installed for 3ds Max or whatever software, you always have the IES files and the lookup table. So that's where I grabbed my favorite one, and now the scene is getting cinematic and this is really looking great. Now the only thing left is that we still need to brighten up the scene. Now let's come let me stop the interactive rendering and let's come to the asset editor. Now the light modifier, let's increase to 5 and let's start the interactive rendering. Nice, the scene is bright, but I want to reduce my sun rays here. Let's come to sun and let me reduce to 0.3. all right, nice. Now we have this, the scene is well lit, and you know, the exposure here, highlight burn, let me reduce that as well. Now we are ready for our final render settings. I want to bring in my components. All I've downloaded from Chaos Cosmos, and also I downloaded from other websites. In coming videos I'll show you where you can also download V-Ray ready components for your scenes. Now let me bring them in by unhiding all. Let's test the rendering. Now we have our scene ready for rendering. Let's go to final render settings. Before we do that, let me still check the exposure. All right, and that's good. So for our final render settings, come to the settings here. I want to change this to medium plus. Set your denoiser to V-Ray. Then this is okay. Render output, I want to change it to 1920 by 2400. That's 4:5. Come to the render elements, right click and find light mix. You want to select light mix. I've already selected it, so it's grayed out, but you have to select it to really enjoy the benefits of light mix as we move on to the post-production after the rendering. And also my environment, I want my global illumination on, I want my reflections on, refractions on, and I want to come to lighting, come to the dome. I want this texture slot copied, come here, paste as instance. Then the reflection as well, paste as instance, paste as instance. Let's see what we have for that. This is very nice, but as we go on, we'll notice that the light looks somehow here. Let me stop that. Then come to this light. I want to set this to 0, the directionality, and nice. Then in the global illumination, brute force light catch 1000 as subdivision. Then the denoiser sets the preset to mild, and we are good to go. Now let's render our final scenes. So we have the final rendering of our interior. So before we save our image, I want to briefly talk about the post-production in the V-Ray frame buffer. With the options for post-production in the V-Ray frame buffer, you have a lot to achieve even without taking it to any external post-production software like Photoshop or other ones, you can do everything to make your scene look amazing here on the V-Ray frame buffer. Now the first is the lookup table. In the file, I've selected this file. This is I love this Kim Amland Photographic 03 Cube, and that's what I've selected from Corona lookup table files. And you can change the blend mode to what you feel is okay. Normal is okay, and then you can set the opacity. You can see how the scene is changing as I'm toggling this on and off. We want to just keep it as 0.45, somewhere around there, and make sure it's on work in linear, not on the others. Then I want to come to the exposure again and still check things. All right, this is still okay, the exposure is okay, and okay, the exposure is fine. All right, then the lens effects, just leave the lens effects. The sharpen and blur, that's fine as 2 as well. You can check what you like, whatever you like, just use it. Then the noiser is okay, set at mild. Then the light mix that we selected the other time, you will see how amazing light mix can be on your renders and how time saving it can be. Now light mix will store the information of all the light within your scene, and starting from the dome light, once you uncheck that, you see all the dome light effect on your scene, light calculations and scene will disappear. And now I've checked it again, it is now back. You can increase the intensity of all the lights here, you can change the color, it's amazing. Even the IS lights, I can turn them off, everything is off now, you can see on the scene. If you turn it on again, you can see all the effects, the light calculation is back. The light modifier too can be turned on, that's the lights just behind the window here. Or you can reduce the effect, you can see, to 0.78. Then these other ones as well is here as well, below the okay, that's this. All right, this here. All right, this here as well. Then okay, let me search. All right, so now this is the one at the island, the rectangle light, and that's the reason why it's good for you to always name your lights. You can see how great, how natural the scene looks here. You can decide to keep this. I'll just remove it, it's looking even way better like this. So the sunlight as well, you can remove the sunlight, all the effects of the sunlight will go, remaining it remains that of the HDRI that is sustaining the interior and lighting it up. So basically that is what this is all about. All the self illumination, you know, would also go with the self illumination, and this is good if you want to export whatever changes that you've done. You want to set them, you want to bake them to the scene. That is, all your light will assume the values here. You can just click on to scene, and that's a wrap on enhancing interior design with V-Ray lighting in SketchUp. Remember, the best way to learn is by experimenting with different settings to see what works best for your specific scenes. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the bell icon for more tutorials like this one. See you next time.